and studs! Welcome back to the 41st millennium. In this video, we are going to be featuring the Vindicare Assassin, which happens to be my favorite character model in the whole of the 40K universe. So the point of this whole video is kind of like a farm-to-table showcase of what it takes to get a Warhammer model built, undercoated, and finally painted. With regards to the painting portion, I will be walking you through how to paint a Vindicare Assassin from the boring gray of the plastic model to the beautiful colors of the finished product. I will let you know, while this is a medium length video at around 15 minutes, the whole entire length it took me to finish this model was right around 8 to 10 hours, which is crazy for a lot of people to grasp because there's a ton of stuff that goes into finishing the model, especially with painting the model as well. Right now we're going to hit the boring gray model with an undercoat of Chaos Black. An undercoat allows future paint to be painted on and adhere to the surface. After the undercoat is dried, we are going to hit this model with a base coat of ABADDON Black. And ABADDON Black is more of a gloss kind of shade rather than the matte shade of the Chaos Black that we used before. Now what you're going to see here is basically a highlight coat of a 1-to-1 blend of Chaos Black and Dark Reaper. And what you need to do is use a wet palette if you want, because that will prevent your paints from drying out and allow you to blend the paints together without the paints drying out. So by highlighting the model, you're going to be picking out the raised edges of the model and bringing them to light. Pretty much where the light would strike the peaks of things is where you should be highlighting them. And when you first start off, you can use a slightly thicker brush and be kind of messy about where you highlight. And as you progress on, you will need to do thinner and thinner width of brush strokes so that you can pinpoint the highest highlights with the lightest color possible. And now you're basically seeing me do the second highlight coat, in which we're just going to use straight up Dark Reaper. We're going to go over the areas that we painted with the 1-to-1 Dark Reaper and Chaos Black coat, but kind of, like I said before, watch your brush strokes and make sure the brush strokes aren't as wide as the ones that you did before on the first highlight coat. Now moving on to the third highlight coat, we're going to be doing a 1-to-1 blend of Dark Reaper and Thunderhawk Blue. And again, brush strokes going to be thinner and thinner compared to the prior ones, just to the raised edges, as you can see right there. Slowly but surely, we are building up the lighter and lighter colors, and we are using a thinner brush now so that we can just pick out those very, very raised edges. And now, believe it or not, we're going to be hitting the model again with a fourth highlight coat of Thunderhawk Blue. Again, you don't really need to go through all these blends. This is so that you can have a smoother transition. This is a character model, so I wanted to spend as much time as I could possible. Now with the fifth highlight coat, we're going to do a blend of 1-to-1 Thunderhawk Blue and FENRISIAN Gray. As I said before, I normally would not spend this much time on a regular model because this model is so important to me in a character model. I will build up these areas and make it look good, as opposed to your regular infantry models. I would not be doing this for. It just would be probably the base coat and one highlight coat, and that's pretty much it. And finally, we're going to finish with a sixth highlight coat of FENRISIAN Gray, and we're going to just be pointing out the most top raised edges and being judicious to where we put those highlights. And voila, as you can see before your eyes, those very, very highly raised points are being highlighted by me and being accentuated by the FENRISIAN Gray. As I said, you do not need that much. And now we're going to be moving on painting the leather items with a base coat of RHINOX hide. And these little items really make your model pop, because if you just left it black like this, it's kind of boring to look at, and we need some detail to start giving more life to the model. So on this particular model, we're going to be painting this RHINOX hide on the pistol holster, the straps that hold down the belt as well as the various bullets, and then finally the straps that hold down the knife as well. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you like this painting tutorial. I will let you know I am by no means an expert painter, but I would consider myself slightly above average with my painting skill level. There are still techniques I need to improve on, but I will show you how these different particular techniques are done on this model. So we will showcase shading, blending, highlighting, and dry brushing. I know, there's a big, huge leap from what you saw in the prior clip to this clip now. I just was at my friend's place and I forgot to video all this stuff for you. So here I am when I have basically colored all the different items on the model. As you can tell, there's a very, very large difference now when you start putting in the details, because those details, again, bring life and character to this model right now. So what you're seeing me do is doing a shade of the skulls using SERAPHIM Sepia. And what shades do is it pulls into the darker recesses and then accentuate those shades there. And now we're going to be using NULN oil, which is a shade for silver areas. And I love using NULN oil for these particular types of colors because it gives the metal kind of a dirty, grimy feel, but then again gives depth to the current model that you're looking at. So after that, we are going to be hitting the raised silver areas with something called STORMHOST silver. And STORMHOST silver is probably the most brightest silver that you can find. So I'm picking the edges of like the antenna to accentuate where the light strikes on the antenna right now, as well as in mask where the light would hit, and probably the nose bridge as well as the top of it. I'm also highlighting the backpack as well as the bullets as you saw prior to, again, give more detail to the model. And now we're going to be moving on to the first highlight for the leather items, in which I'm using MOURNFANG brown. And I did not say before, when you're highlighting, you're actually not using the tip of the paintbrush. You're actually using the edge of the paintbrush to get those really thin, crisp lines as you're allowing the paintbrush to glide over the edges. And because brown is such a prevalent color on this particular model, I decided to do a second highlight for these leather items, and I'm using SKRAG brown. Again, using the same principle, we are using very judicious amounts of this SKRAG brown to pick out the topmost highlights of this model, because you want to have a contrast between the SKRAG brown and the MOURNFANG brown, so bring more detail and highlights. And now, as we're going to the knife holster, we are going to be using WARPSTONE glow to accentuate the edges of this thing so you can see it better. Moving on, you're seeing me highlight the edges of the skulls with Screaming Skull, and the principle is pretty much the same. We are only highlighting the topmost portions, so basically the nose bridge, the brow of the current model. And there you go. We have the almost completed body of the Vindicare Assassin, and now we're going to be moving on painting the Exodus rifle that the model is going to be using to basically off enemies. Again, because the base coat is so dark, you're probably going to have to use 2 to 3 thin coats of CALIBAN green in order to fully paint the gun. And now you are seeing me hit the scope with lead belcher, and as well as the muzzle of the gun. Now I've jumped forward, and now we're basically using NULN oil to again shade the silver areas to give more depth to those particular items right now. We are going to be using REIKLAND FLESHSHADE to shade the gold emblems on the gun. And you can see the shades go into the crevices real nicely to give some depth and definition to them. Same thing with the gold skull over here, as it fills the eye sockets as well as the nose. Now we're going to be using STORMHOST silver again to highlight the highest points of the silver areas, again to give more definition, as you see. As the base coat of this model is CALIBAN green, I decided to use WARPSTONE glow again to give more definition to the gun as you are looking at it. As you can see, we are done with the body of the Vindicare assassin. It looks absolutely fantastic in my opinion, but hey, I'm biased. Anyway, we're now going to be basing the terrain right now, and we're using DAWNSTONE to bring out the color of the rocks, which is a gray color. After we're done with the base coat of the model, we're going to be using BASILICANUM gray to bring out the recesses of the model. As you can see, it is really darkening up the crevices really nicely, but we are going to solve that later with hitting this area with highlights, so we'll bring out more definition again. So right now we are going to be using a technique called dry brushing, and dry brushing is typically used to highlight different areas of the model. So what's going to happen is you're going to be getting rid of all the paint pretty much on the brush and getting it all on the paper towel. And then what you're then going to do is lightly brush all the raised parts. So in this case, the raised parts are the rocks, and you'll see gradually that the tops of these areas are going to become lighter and lighter. And now that we're painting skulls, guess what color we're using? USHABTI bone again. We are going to be putting at least 2 to 3 coats of this USHABTI bone on, because the base coat is so dark, you'll need a lot of this lighter paint to cover it up. And pretty much there you have it. After the final brush strokes, we are going to be done putting the base coat on these skulls. The next thing that we're going to be doing is hitting it with AGRAX EARTHSHADE, and that gives the skull more of a weathered, more of a dark tone rather than the slightly cool tones of the SERAPHIM SEPIA. And because the skulls have been sitting out for a while, I wanted more of a dark color on them. And finally, we're going to be basing the base with RHINOX hide, and we want to make sure that when we are basing the base, I know that sounds kind of funny, we want to have the base to be cohesive with the rest of your army. You don't want a green base with an army with a brown base army. It just doesn't look right. And putting the near finishing touches on the painting is Screaming Skull, which will bring out the highlights. Again, the eyebrow ridges, as well as the nose ridge, as well as the top of the skull. We're going to be bringing more detail to. And because I like grass on my models, because I don't like the base to look completely naked, well, I'm going to be hitting it with Elmer's glue, so then I can then put these little grass blades on where the Elmer's glue is, so that it will dry and give, again, more definition and flavor to the model. And there we have it, folks. The model is done, assembled, completed, painted, everything. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I know that it's my first one, so it may be a little bit rough around the edges, but at least you get a flavor of how to basically bring a Warhammer 40K model to life, from the boring gray sprue that it comes on, and then finally putting on all the base coats, the definition, the color, the shades, everything on it. This is Sprues and Studs, and I'll see you all in the next build video.